As one of the most important sectors in the development of any country's economy, the private sector plays a vital role in the economy by creating jobs, providing goods and services, and stimulating economic growth. For that reason, Idrissa Masjoub, the president of the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry (GCCI), was invited to deliver a speech at the launch of the International Monetary Fund (IMF) Joint in-country October 2022 Regional Economic Outlook for Sub-Saharan Africa. The event focuses on the drivers of inflation and the food security situation in the Gambia, as well as authorities' policy responses. While speaking at the ceremony, the GCCI president says the focus should now shift to the social and economic gains of the people, otherwise the country's political gain would be meaningless. He adds that, of recent, the private sector is not having the same approach from the government like during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Whilst we have observed human and political gains from 2016 to date, these are very important things. We all came from a very hard period in the Gambia. But I think we should focus to ensure that there are also gains in the economic and social lives of the people. Otherwise, the political gains would be meaningless under these circumstances. The Gambia have performed better than most after the COVID, despite our lack of medical infrastructure. We don't have soft, we don't have hard infrastructure, but we came out of COVID much better than most countries. And why? And I'm happy that the Vice President is here because we did this thing through successful social solidarity, in the spirit of solidarity between the government, the private sector, and the community. And I noticed that this time we are not having the same approach that was very helpful during the peak of the COVID. The National Business Council was meeting, chaired by the Vice President, almost every weekend. So things didn't happen naturally. There is time that we need leadership to arise. This is not only a government problem. Where we are is also the problem of the community.
As the leader of an organization that facilitates business development, promotes trade, and advances the interests of the Gambian business, nationally and internationally, Mr. Job tells the stakeholders that their biggest challenge is poverty eradication and that the inflation in the Gambia is purely and directly linked to the depreciation of the dollar.
The vulnerability we have today is that the standard of living is very low. Therefore, any type of thing that happens in the market, any variation affects people in a big way. Therefore, our big challenge is the eradication of poverty together with our partners. And this I summarize in four things. One, the high inflation rate, especially food inflation. Two, the high unemployment rate. Three is the supply chain constraint. And four, energy insecurity. On the inflation, it suffices to quote just the World Bank and all that we know. I will not make a quote. But I want to contend, in times like this, we have to innovate. Inflation in the Gambia is purely and directly linked to the depreciation of the dollar. So let's just face that reality that while solving this inflation, especially where we are now, we have to be able to find how do we manage the continuous depreciation of the dollar. The dollar in 20 years ago was 30. Today, $30 to the dollar. But today, it is $60. Even if there was no inflation in the world, zero inflation of all these food items, there will be inflation in the Gambia because the salaries and the income of the Gambians didn't sort of like match the depreciation of the dollar. That is the elephant in the room. And that, to a large extent, is the role of the government, because the government creates like I said, the environment, the location, for location Gambia to be interesting for investment, therefore value creation and employment. The government has a big role, but we have extended our hands many times that we want to participate, because where there is no communication, there will be confusion. And after confusion is conflict. because business is always about sentiment. We have seen capital moving away from Africa in a big way, and without capital, we will.
Job states that their worry in the business sector is the untargeted intervention by the government.
To this thing. Our worry at the business sector, I think it was the IMF, Mr. Bari, who talked about that this untargeted intervention that we do during times like this, some of it is worrying about the Gambia. The major reason we came out of the ERP, it was adopting the floating rate mechanism. And of late, I don't know, between the different organisms of government, we are of the perception that the government, we understand their limitations, we understand why, but we should not panic. We can solve it. They're going back to reference rating. Reference rate is purely a reference rate. It has nothing to do with reality. It is like fixing a rate. So there are two things that can happen. If you want to use that, the central bank must develop mechanism to ensure that this is done in real time, that it reflects the market. Otherwise, it tantamounts to going back to the fixed rates that brought us economic collapse in the 90s. I think another opportunity to innovate. 40% of Gambian import is mainly oil and minerals, oil related, and all these things come from the CFA zone. If you look at today, all our petroleum imports, they come from either Abidjan or from Togo. So I'm just saying that if you make that observation that most of the dollar pressure that we're looking for is to spend it in.
The GCCI president says the country should talk about food sovereignty instead of food insecurity and suggests that the government to come up with mechanism for the people to grow what to eat because they don't have the purchasing power.
On the issue of food insecurity, I think we should start talking about food sovereignty, because what Ukraine has shown is that we cannot move food from the area they are being produced to the areas where they are being consumed. So it's not really a food insecurity problem, because if you have money, you can buy food. So we have to change and talk about being able to produce what we eat, because that is becoming more and more a problem. And I'm also hoping that the state will work with us, both the Ministry of Trade, Agriculture. There is a danger to just focus on mass production. Unemployment, the youth bulge, is our biggest problem in the Gambia. We should think about production by the masses. We cannot leave them alone. So however brilliant you are, you will have the same contradictions that led to all the insecurities we are seeing in West Africa. And when Europe did the same also, so let us try to empower our people to have a living, rather than finding only mechanisms to be able to feed them, where they will not have the buying power to buy those foods that will be produced locally. It tantamounts to the same.
Since inception, the GCCI has been the primary platform for public-private dialogue. The Chamber frequently engages businesses of all sizes and gathers their challenges with a quest to seek redress through policy, legislation, and regulation as the voice of the Gambian business. Reporting for Kerr, Fatou, I am Landin Cisse.